Everyone, thank you for 4 minutes late, but thank you very much. We have a special treat tonight. We have 50 students here from Morelands Elementary with Mrs. Griffin, the music teacher. Wonderful Patsy Treese organized some music for us tonight, and so we just want to express our appreciation for this evening. So I'm sorry we're very late. But here we go. Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Please stand for the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On behalf of the board, I welcome all members of the audience to this evening's meeting. This meeting is a working session of the board to conduct the business of the district. The agenda for today's meeting has been published, and the agenda items to be discussed and/or voted on have been studied by the board members. I would like to introduce the people here on the dais with me. To my far left, Recording Secretary Cindy Benson, Superintendent Larry Francois, board members Kimberly D'Angelo, David Kogan, Sandy Hayes, and Ken Smith. I am Amy Cast, and I currently serve as president of the board. Agendas for this meeting, as well as minutes from our previous meeting, are available on the table at the back. If you are here to address the board on agenda items, please sign in on the clipboard that's on the table with the agendas. You will have an opportunity near the beginning of the meeting for your comments. And the first order of business is the superintendent's report.
Good afternoon. Welcome. I want to begin tonight by recognizing Inglemoor High School students Karina Lee and Nathan Morgan, who are candidates for the 2016 Presidential Scholars Program. Karina and Nathan, I should say, are two of 4,000 candidates who will vie for 800 semifinalists and 161 Presidential Scholar honorees. Students are nominated and selected based on overall academic excellence, artistic scholarship in the visual arts, performing arts, or creative writing, or ability and accomplishment in career and technical education fields. So this is really a very prestigious honor for these two. On January 13th, I attended the Snohomish County STEM Network Executive Leadership Council meeting. This network is a combination of school districts, higher education, industry, and nonprofit partners working together in concert to promote and develop STEM educational and career pathways within Snohomish County. Initial funding for launching the network was provided by Washington STEM, which I think is a fairly familiar organization to most of us. And at that meeting, we decided that our immediate priority moving forward is the creation of a one-stop online portal for students and families, schools, and industry partners to post and to seek STEM opportunities. So sort of an online meeting place to coordinate all of the various STEM efforts that are happening in our respective fields across the county. On January 13th and then again on January 21st, I attended the Bothell and Woodinville Chamber of Commerce meetings respectively, where the annual State of the City presentations were provided. It's always interesting to hear about the priorities, accomplishments, and the challenges of our local cities. And Woodinville announced at their meeting the appointment of a new city manager, Brandon Buchanan, who will be coming to Woodinville from Arizona. He'll begin his position on March 1 and will be bringing 2 school-aged children to Woodinville, and it was noted that North Shore Schools was a strong motivator to Brandon to consider relocating to the Woodinville area, so always happy to hear that. On January 14th, I attended the North Shore Schools Foundation board meeting with Director Kogan and updated the board on the final boundary plan recommendation that the board will be taking up later tonight, the kindergarten and enrollment mitigation plan, and the November 18th calendar waiver request. And the foundation is gearing up for their annual expo and luncheon on April 6th, and I know you've all been invited to that. January 15th, I attended the Puget Sound ESD Superintendent meeting, and that was followed down in Renton by a WANC Administrative Council meeting. We received a presentation from Gil Mendoza, OSPI Deputy Superintendent, and OSPI staff on the recently enacted Every Student Succeeds Act, the successor to No Child Left Behind. And at the WANC Administrative Council, we discussed a request from the Everett School District to join the WANC Consortium. And the Admin Council, the superintendents of the 7-member districts, determined that we needed more time to investigate the implications of Everett joining, since they are already a member of the Snow Owl Skills Center, so we're not quite sure how dual membership in the Skills Center would work at the state level. On January 19th, I attended the Kenmore Elementary School improvement visit with President Cast and Directors Hayes and Smith. Again, many thanks to Kenmore Principal Melissa Riley and the Kenmore staff and students for an informational presentation and the opportunity to visit classrooms. And there's clearly much positive work taking place to support the achievement of all Kenmore students. January 19th, later in the day, attended the audit entry conference, with President Cass and Directors D'Angelo and Smith. The audit is progressing well. It's anticipated that the field work will conclude by the 1st of February with the final entry conference held before midwinter break. And that's about the soonest I ever recall getting an audit completed and the conference held. On January 25th, yesterday, toured the North Shore Primary Center with Karen Musiger and Tracy Rogstad from Capital Projects, cabinet members and the principals of Fernwood, Canyon Creek, and Kokanee Elementary Schools who will be sending students to the North Shore Primary Center. It was a good opportunity to look at the tenant improvements that have been completed by Eastlake Community Church and to begin thinking about and planning for hosting half-day kindergartens at the Primary Center next year. And tomorrow I have the opportunity to participate with Puget Sound, ESD, Highline, and Seattle superintendents in a meeting with the Seattle Times editorial board. I was part of a small group of WASA representatives that also met with the editorial board last year. Our focus tomorrow will be around the need for progress in this legislative session on the McCleary basic education funding, compensation and levy reform, and simple majority for passage of school district bonds, particularly as schools and districts struggle with the facility impacts of full-day kindergarten and class size reduction. And our message will coincide nicely with the recently launched public service campaign by the Seattle Times called the Greater Good Campaign, focused on funding and policy improvements for early learning K-12 and higher education. And then later this week on Sunday and Monday, I will be at the WASBO Legislative Conference in Olympia with Directors Hayes, Smith, and possibly Director Hogan.
Not this time, I'm sorry.
Not this time, all right. And this conference will coincide with meetings of the WASA Legislative and Finance Committee and the WASA Board that I serve on both of those on Sunday morning. And we have secured meetings with all 9 of our local legislators for Monday, where we'll continue to advocate for progress on McCleary and the levy cliff this session, as well as legislation to streamline state assessments and and address teacher and substitute shortage issues. So looking forward to that opportunity to meet with our legislators. That's it.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Francois. First on our agenda, Director of Communications Leanna Albrecht will address the board regarding January as School Board Recognition Month.
Can you hear me? I am Karen's voice this evening since she has lost it. So it is a very special day. Tonight we take time to recognize you, the North Shore School District Board of Directors, in observance of School Board Recognition Month. We hope that you enjoyed the reception that was held before the meeting tonight, and we would like to extend a very special thank you to the North Shore Schools Foundation for the refreshments, and to Patsy Treese, if she's here, thank you, from the North Shore Music Boosters, and Mrs. Griffin from Morelands Elementary School for arranging to have the Morelands Choir perform for you. And we would like to also present you with a copy of Governor Inslee's proclamation of School Board Recognition Month and a certificate of recognition from the Washington State School Directors Association for your dedication and commitment to improving student learning. On behalf of the staff, the students, and families of North Shore, we thank you for your commitment to providing a world-class education for our kids. Thank you.
I'd just like to say, if you serve on the board long enough, collect these certificates and you can paper a wall somewhere in your house. But just to dovetail on what Leanna says, and I know I've said it before, and it's probably a tired line, but I'll say it again, that school board service is truly the most basic grassroots community service one can provide. I know you all give a tremendous amount of time and energy to the role, and there's no compensation or personal glory involved at all. You're just here to do the best you can for the kids in the community of North Shore, so thank you very much for your service.
Next on our agenda is our association and public comments. The North Shore School District Board of Directors has set aside a period of up to 60 minutes to receive updates and comments from association leaders and citizens from our community. The board expects speakers to address matters related to district operations, policies, procedures, and agenda items under consideration by the board. Comments should not make reference to any employee or representative of the district by name or by identifiable reference. Board meetings are not the appropriate setting for personnel complaints. If interested, there is a complaint process available through the Office of the Superintendent. Please note that because of the public governance process, the board may ask clarifying questions regarding topics not on the meeting's agenda, but will likely defer discussion to a future meeting if warranted, in order for staff to prepare any necessary background information for board members to review and for the discussion item to be included on a published agenda for the benefit of any other parties who may have interest in the topic. Alternatively, a district employee or board member may respond to individuals offering public comments at a later date if warranted to do so. When addressing the board, please state your name clearly for our records. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. There's a timer that will sound when your time has expired. We thank you for your participation in the governance process. And for association leaders wishing to address the board, North Shore Schools Foundation.
Good evening. I'm Becky Birch, and I'm co-president of the North Shore Schools Foundation. I am joined tonight by fellow board members Sherry Cranick and Catherine Williams. We are here to honor your service. We know a lot about volunteering. You guys are super volunteers. You devote endless hours of your time on school improvement visits, on any number of things, committees, study sessions. I think a person may need to walk in your shoes to truly understand the level of commitment that you have to a quality education in our district, and we so appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Becky. And thank you for everyone from the Schools Foundation. This reception tonight was wonderful. Everyone was remarking on it, and I have to say thank you all for everything you do to support the kids in the district also. Thank you very much.
Thank you for dinner.
Yes, and thank you for dinner, you guys. You even took care of our dinner tonight. So, North Shore Music Boosters?
My name's Patsy Treese, and I'm with the North Shore Music Partners. And even though you're not supposed to name employees, I have to give kudos to Cindy Benson because she helped arrange the music as well. And I just want to join in everyone's thanking and gratitude toward you. The school board has been so supportive of music in our district, and that's the reason that we have such excellent programs. And all of the students who participate in either instrumental or vocal music have wonderful memories of their school times, and it actually helps develop their brain. So we want you to keep supporting music, and thank you very much.
Very much, Patsy. PTSA Council? No? Any other associations? All right, great. So we'll go next to public comments. So Jim Meisner, if I'm pronouncing that correctly?
I was going to say good evening to the board and congratulations on your well-deserved recognition for January. I want to start off with that. My name is Jim Meisner. I currently serve on the board of PACE at Lockwood, and I'm the board rep liaison between PACE and you guys, the North Shore School District. So that's kind of why I'm at these meetings all the time. But I want to talk with you about a special patrol that's been started up in our area, and it's called Pause Patrol. I don't know if you've heard about this, but all the dads are getting together and we're greeting the kids as they get off the buses, kind of welcoming them, saying have a great day, helping them during the lunch periods and also during recess. And what we found out by doing this during the last month is that it's helping the teachers, just helping their whole day out in general, and just a very positive thing, you know, for our school. So we've noticed a very, very positive, everything's improved a lot this last month. So I just wanted you to know about that within our community, and that's about it. I can't really say much about names and stuff, but thank you very much.
Appreciate you sharing information about the program. Thank you. Edward Smith?
Good evening, my name is Edward Smith and I'm here tonight to talk about not specifically boundary changes, but what's going to affect some children because of the boundary changes. I know that the EDTF has been working on the boundaries for years and that they've taken in a lot of considerations from public and school board. And that the implementation of the boundaries, if approved, it will start 2017 and 2018. I'm not sure if everybody is aware that it will affect some children next year as well. I know it's been brought up 4 schools in 4 years, and thinking back when I was at that age of teenager, that is quite a big deal. So, and I know that there's concerns about transition period, so the sooner we get approved, the longer time they have to address the transition for those communities or people that have to be reached out due to language barriers or cultural barriers. So we really need the wavering process or the boundaries approved, so those that want to try and waiver the 60 children at Arrowhead Elementary that will be affected, it'll go to one school next year, another school the following, a third school, and then finally high school the 4th year. So it's a really difficult change. We'd like my children to have the same opportunities I had to and go to high school with kids they grew up with instead of being bounced from school to school to school. And at that age, it's a really difficult transition. So just hope we can get a vote on it.
Thank you very much. Kevin Hurd?
Good evening. My name is Kevin Hurt, and I'm the parent of a 6th grade student at Frank Love Elementary that's directly impacted by the EDTF boundary change recommendations. I understand that changes need to be made to school boundaries. My concern is less for the boundary shifts, rather the impact on the students being shifted from different schools during the implementation period. Specifically, the EDTF recommendations have my son changing from 7th grade at Canyon Park to Kenmore in 8th grade. So essentially he'll be going to 4 schools in 4 years, from 6th grade until he enters Bothell High School in 9th. This is not in the best interest for education within the North Shore School District. In addition to his transition between elementary and high school being cut from 3 down to 2 years, the 2-year experience will split between 2 schools. The junior high and middle school years are a crucial time for these students. It's important to have a sense of belonging to the school and community. How will these students in the situation feel connected to the school and community if they have to leave after 1 year? I understand that the cohort will have priority for the waiver to remain at Canyon Park Junior High if the school is accepting waivers. At this point, there's no assurance that Canyon Park will be even open to waivers, as it is currently closed. The students caught in the crossfire between boundary changes and grade level realignments should have real solution, not priority for waivers that is impossible to obtain due to school closed status. School has not been easy for my son for many reasons. Over the last few years, he's actually started to show great enthusiasm for school. As a 6th grader, he already feels the school district only cares about the 300+ kindergartners that has experienced at Frank Love. I can only imagine how he's going to feel when he learns about the boundary shifts and what that'll mean for his education. Please make sure you consider the recommendations. The impact students are not just numbers, but they are real students that have their educational experience altered by the boundary shifts. Please make sure that real solutions are found to help these students, not just the promise of waivers. Thanks.
Very much. Sir, I saw you come in. I just wanted to make sure you didn't put down your name for public comments before I conclude. Okay, thank you very much. That concludes public comments. Next up on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. And the consent agenda passes unanimously. Next on the agenda, item number 10, second reading of board policy number 8110, routes and schedule. This, as the second reading, this would be the time where we call for a vote on the revised policy. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Can,
Any discussion? All right, hearing none.
No, I have a question. So, and this is coming off of being in the later start today, so that's why it came up. Where did the 90%, because I wasn't part of this, I don't think I was, when the board policy was made for 90% efficiency, was I?
Honestly, I'll have to come speak for me too.
1983.
Actually, the 90% is coming from the, well, from our law stuff, so we've taken the language off, a lot of our laws of language.
So if when we do boundary change reconfiguration, when we implement later start, if we go below, like to 88, my understanding is they just, because it's not tied to funding right now, correct?
Right now, it's not.
Yeah.
So I would say that the policy, if you want to down here, the policy, as it's stated, has a goal of achieving 90%, not a firm metric of achieving 90%.
Okay.
And certainly the board always has the opportunity to revisit any policy and make an amendment if you feel that's an appropriate step.
Oh, that's good clarification. So like if for some reason with all this change, we come in at 88, let's say, or something, or 89, we would have the opportunity to look at that as a board. Okay.
Correct.
Okay,
From a
we're just
policy
saying it's a
perspective.
goal,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Right.
Okay, just clarifying because that came up. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All right, and the policy revision is approved unanimously. Next on the agenda is the second reading of the final Enrollment Demographics Task Force 2017 boundary recommendation. This is the second reading. This would be the time to ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Any questions? Any thoughts?
So the 4 schools in 4 years question, I think we're wrestling with in some sense, or at least I'm wrestling with, is whether that's a question we deal with on this particular item or whether we would deal with that in what we might call an implementation phase. And so, Superintendent.
Yeah. So I think it's more of an implementation issue than necessarily a boundary adjustment plan. Any plan that adjusts boundaries and reconfigures grade levels is going to create that dynamic with some group of students. So we are prepared to launch tomorrow, presuming board approval of the plan tonight, an early waiver process specifically for people who are looking to transition in 16-17 to the school they will be at in 17-18 to mitigate some of the impacts of multiple schools across multiple years. We are making an exception. We are prioritizing those students who will be impacted by those boundary changes, and we're making an exception to the closed schools rule that will do it more on a space availability basis. So if we can find a way to bring a student in, depending on what demand may look like into a school, even though that school may be closed, if there is space available, we're going to try and make every exception we can to accommodate those early transitions for folks who find themselves in that multiple year dilemma.
Be a specific waiver process for those students, like a separate, will there be
Yes.
something to identify them?
Yeah, so there'll be 3 tiers to the waiver process. So the one we'll be opening tomorrow will be specific to people who are seeking an early transition to the school they will be at in 17-18, pending the approval of this plan. And then the second tier will just be our regular in-district waiver process of folks who would just prefer to attend a school someplace other than their neighborhood school for a variety of reasons, but not tied to the boundary plan. And then the third wave will be out-of-district families who are looking to get a placement in a North Shore school, primarily our secondary schools that remain open to waivers.
About the 11th grade, are they that tier 1?
So
Or the seniors, what is it, the seniors?
So that would be for,
whatever?
2017-18.
Not next year.
Correct,
Okay.
right. And we'll be opening up that process very early next fall. I believe October 1 is the date we'll open that up, because it's to our advantage too to have as many folks like the seniors or 8th grade, 5th grade, 10th grade, 5th grade, declare early so that we can factor that into our staffing and enrollment planning for 17-18.
Anyone that chooses to, if I choose, I'm going 4 different schools and I choose to have this waiver, I find my own transportation, is that correct?
That is correct. I mean, the waiver process does rely on folks providing their own transportation, with the caveat that once things stabilize in the fall, if there is room on a bus that you can get to somewhere, an existing stop that goes to that school, will allow you to ride the bus. But we again need to first get sort of a sense of what the neighborhood demands are. But if we can accommodate folks getting on, so there might be a little bit of a delay at the beginning of the year, but we try and make every exception we can, and that's a normal process we do.
So I think I'm tracking, but just to make sure, so for the student that would have the 4 years, 4 schools in 4 years concern, if they took this early waiver, then they would avoid having that particular situation?
Sure, so that it's most applicable, I think the example that was used in public comment tonight is the student's going to be a 6th grader, or is a 6th grader this year. Would be a 7th grader, so one school, 1 year.
Right.
Would be a 7th grader next year at junior high A.
Right.
An 8th grader in 17-18 at junior high B, and then a 9th grader in 18-19 at high school. So if they are able to waiver next year, they will spend 2 years, 7th and 8th grade, at the same middle school, junior high to middle school, before then proceeding to high school. So, you know, they're however long they've been in elementary, 2 years out of middle school, and then 4 years out of high school.
It sounds like you've already gone through the process to be willing to prioritize that, and even, and I think we talked about this last time, even maybe if it were to press those schools a little bit larger than we would normally have in a normal year, to be willing to accept as much as the walls will allow.
Exactly. We don't have a sense yet of what the demand may be,
Right.
and we are talking about a boundary plan that impacts 3,500 students district-wide. So, we want to be a little bit measured about what we can commit to and what we can't commit to. But we will try and be as accommodating as we can be. We understand it's a challenge. Depending upon the age of the student, it's certainly a challenge, and we understand the concern with multiple transitions, and to the extent we can mitigate it, that we'll try to do so.
Thank you very much, I appreciate that. I did have one other question/comment which related to conversations we had with the board, and thinking about families who are not able to have their own transportation. So they're not, I think some of the planning assumes kind of car-dependent families, and some of our families may not have that. And so to the extent that families would ask for a waiver due to the lack of vehicle transportation, they could walk to some place now and they can't. And I know that there's a whole host of issues surrounding that, but and if that's something where the board would provide guidance, or if we felt strongly enough about that, or if that's not quite a criteria in the waiver process. I hope I'm not being too vague.
Well, so the waiver process, clearly states that transportation for any waiver is the responsibility of the family. And as I said, if there is a after things stabilize in the fall, if there's a bus that they can get to that's on the route to the school they're waving into, we allow for that. The EDTF has discussed pretty thoroughly the idea of dual busing or grandfather busing, and has, based on our last experience with boundary adjustments, has, for many valid reasons, determined that that's not something that they've recommended.
Sorry, I'll re-clarify, I think I was vague. The question of a family who could walk to the school that they're currently going to, boundary changes moves them to a school that they could not walk to. And then if they're a family that does not have access to vehicles, that they don't have cars, so the parents would have to get on the bus and take an hour bus ride to go pick up their kid if they're sick or something like that. So is that, where would that kind of a waiver request fall in the prioritization?
That's a good question. I don't know if we haven't discussed that specifically. We would probably want to vet that with legal counsel to determine what whether that would be an appropriate criteria to apply, or whether or not that might be seen as discriminatory in some manner. So we can certainly ask that question, but we haven't discussed that specific question.
And then just since I asked this question, I just wanted to say how thankful I am, and we've had many updates and the process has gone on a long time, and I thought the plan was very, very good to begin with. I thought the 4 years, in 4 schools in 4 years, was the kind of the remaining problem, and I'm really thankful that there's an intention with a likelihood of solving that for most families, or hopeful. So I'll be voting in favor of the motion.
So since I was there at the beginning and helped launch this crazy plan, I just want to thank I know several of the members of the EDTF are here tonight, so I'm on a date night, but the amazing amount of hours and thought that was put into it. I had the good fortune to watch the work in progress, and it was, I mean, there wasn't a house that wasn't thought of as to the impact, and I can't thank you guys enough. This is an incredible plan that you've put together, and we are very, very appreciative and fortunate.
I love it too, how thoughtful you guys were about this process, and I wasn't part of it, but it took on.
And I just like to say, to me, reflecting upon it, you know, here's a situation where the school district had to deal with a situation with factors outside of our control, really. And so what does a community do with that when you have a certain set of resources to deal with something that is so far outside your control? And I started thinking about the hundreds of people, thousands of people who went online to post criteria to help the EDTF, folks who turned up to open houses to give feedback, the EDTF volunteers and staff members who listened to that feedback and went through line by line by line to really thoughtfully incorporate the feedback in, and it's just really, I'm not getting too philosophical, but in an age where you hear a lot of cynicism, you know, it's very heartwarming to me to see a community work together like this, and I'm very appreciative of it. So, during no more discussion, I'd like to call for a vote. Pleased to say that it passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone.
And Mr. Smith, I'm on the North Shore Junior High PTA meeting, so I've written your name down. We're looking forward to seeing you in the fall.
All right.
It almost seems anticlimactic. Suppose means we maybe did something right. Thank you to particularly Ryan and Doug and Support Services folks and Carol. Thank you.
Next on the agenda. I know. I know. If we did. Pops in order. But next on the agenda, item number 12 is the start time task force recommendation. Intermediate steps for second semester 2015-16 school year and the 2016-17 school year. So this is the first time we're formally discussing this on the board, on the dais, but we have seen this in our board briefing. the idea that the Start Time Task Force, while working through their work, was taking a look at the program put in place for this year to offer an intermediate step of second through seventh period options at our high school for students who might elect to do that, and the financial implications of the shuttle that was put around to support that. And so, just to summarize what is on the agenda, they are making a recommendation that for the remainder of this school year, that they recommend the elimination of the morning shuttle that supports the second period. So that would be beginning, actually, it lists today. But continuing the afternoon shuttle that started as a seventh period option, but could be accessed by other students staying after school for any sort of activity. And then they also have a recommendation in 2016-17 for no new intermediate steps or strategies to be added, to continue to offer students to register for a second through seventh period option, not to tie transportation to that second through seventh period schedule, and also to review that afternoon shuttle, which would be turning into an activity bus for high school. So I'd like to open this up for discussion. Or should we make a motion? Yeah, so I'm going to make a motion to approve, first of all. If I can have a second, and then if we could please open up for discussion. Any thoughts? This,
I'll go first. I think this is very well thought out, given the information they have received. I like the idea of it becoming an activity bus. I know there's certainly our work around equity and achievement. There's some discussion already at the high school level of how to access that bus for those particular kiddos. So thank you very much for the thoughtful idea.
So I have questions in two spots. One is what kind of outreach has been to the students currently riding the morning bus? And then what is the difference between an activity bus and how we're currently doing it now?
So there were two students, one Bothell and one Inglemore, riding a very big bus in the morning, and they, I noticed today when we were looking at the 2 through 7 analysis, the principals worked with them so that they're no longer needing that AM shuttle. So, and that was really hard. Woodinville had 0 for months in the morning. And what's the difference between an activity bus and this one? Activity buses might stay longer, where seventh period is over a little earlier, and there are still students staying at school for activities, for other, studying and working with teachers, and maybe even some of the sports that are, practicing. So it just provides a longer window instead of cutting it off so quickly.
And when we say activity buses, so then in terms of the schedules, like if we could assess demand or something like that, so I think right now there's one bus and one route per school, like if there was enough demand to maybe run 2 routes that would be more efficient or something like that, is that the intention for the rest of this year, or would that be the kind of thinking for next year?
Actually, that would be the thinking for next year. I think this year we want to just continue on with the PM, so our 2 to 7 p.m. portion of that. For next year, I think what we want to do is work with the principals and the schools to determine sort of what the needs are from the after-school activity perspective.
Ron, if I remember correctly, those buses are riding anywhere from maybe 15 to 25 students per bus, and so they're probably about half capacity.
Yeah, they're at half capacity right now based on the timing of the 7th period, or the ending of the 7th period.
And how similar is that to our junior high activity buses in terms of usage?
I think our junior high activity bus has a much higher usage.
Percentage-wise?
Yeah, so, and they're definitely based around activities. So at the junior high level, transportation has worked with the various principals to determine what days the buses should arrive at certain times, so we can ensure we capture the most students during that day.
And if I'm remembering correctly, so for like the junior high activity bus, a student participating in after school and in the sports, that bus would generally leave at the end of sports practice, and there may be 2 or 3 or 4 sports, so that they could use that as a form of transportation if they were participating in the junior high sports. Is that roughly your understanding?
At the junior high level, a lot of the riderships that we see are your kids who are staying after school for some special hang time.
Time, math help.
Math help, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Any other questions?
I just wanted to comment that I know last year we threw this together kind of quickly so that, and I'm sure we're already going to do this, but that would make sure to have good communication to the students and to their parents that there's this 2 through 7 option in their schedule.
So it was late last year, and so I think we did the best we could in the spring, but then we certainly circled around again in the fall. And so I think what we're seeing is many of the students who are riding the afternoon shuttle are actually periods 1 through 7 students, or they're not all exclusively periods 2 through 7 students. So, and we'll certainly next year, depending on what time the bus may run. I mean, we want to open it up to as many students as possible who could ride the bus. If we're running the bus, as we just, in the name of efficiency, the more students we can get on it, the more sense it makes to provide the service. And so,
my comment, though I appreciate that, wasn't tied to the transportation. I was trying to make a separate statement that students, maybe they do know, but that students are aware that I can come to school 2 through 7.
Right, because remember last time
It was
we
right
put-
during the schedule.
Exactly, so I'm channeling you, Heather, but we're working with pre-registration, so that's the difference. If you get it on the pre-registration sheet and you talk about what do you want for next year now as they're thinking about classes, then that's how they start building the schedule and doing the registration part, and then it's there, right? How'd I do?
And then, I'm sorry, the last follow-up I know. So on the 2 through 7, so to the extent that we would market, I think is what Kimberly's pushing towards, marketing the 2 through 7 option to make sure the students that knew that there's not transportation provided by the district in the morning, because we had a fair number of students doing 2 through 7, but very, very, very few of them using the transportation.
0.
And then one of the things that was around, because everything was in flux, I think part of the concern was whether you could participate in intercollegiate sports, or interscholastic, sorry about that, the sports, and it was just uncertain, and I know some of the kids were advised not to do the 2 through 7 period and whatever, and I think that scheduling, have all the activities been moved such that sports practice starts after 7th period, or is that?
On the course selection sheets this year, it'll be a 2 through 7 option, transportation not provided. So we want to make it very clear that if you choose to go 7th period or a 2 through 7 option, there will not be transportation provided. So that's on the course selection sheet. As far as the athletic piece, there are still some athletics that are going to need to start before the end of 7th period. So those need to be worked out individually. If the student is interested, they need to talk to their coach, and the athletic directors and the principals facilitate that. But there's not, with space constraints, facility constraints, and then light and dark, there's some sports we just can't hold until after 7th period to begin.
Country. They work it out.
All right. Any other questions? All right, I'd like to call for a vote then. All right, so that motion carries unanimously. Next up on the agenda is our first information item, which is the district budget status report for November 2015. Anyone have any questions? This discussion?
Can we pull that up? I do not have my copy. That's the actual, yeah. Oh, I never do this. questions, and then I forgot it at home, so.
So, I don't know if, we received in our board briefing, going to the question of capital projects. Karen here? Yeah, we were just talking in between the break, but the concern that I had raised, the question was the amount in the basically unreserved part of capital projects fund. And in our board briefing on the 15th, we received a spreadsheet that lists out, in some sense, spending down the fund balance, both for the bond amount as well as the unassigned that could be spent on any of the needs through our capital projects process. And so I think there's a valid question to be had about that process, but I think, in my opinion, I don't know if it for the board to deal with, I think it makes sense to do that as a part of the broader budget discussion, and then getting the list of the exact projects and what the process is for which capital projects go through, to say here's all the items, like which roofs need to be replaced, which ones have to be done this summer, et cetera. So Karen was explaining that, and I think for the good of the whole, if that's one of the questions that you might have had from the budget report, I think going through that in the budget process that's coming up soon and seeing the details of how capital projects is doing that, because the spreadsheet they gave us is useful, but I think it would be useful to talk about that at whenever we get to the budget process. So maybe pushing that even to the later agenda item 17 or whatever it is today to think about that. I don't know if that was your question or not.
Yeah, I kind of had one along that line. So are we gonna, when is that budget?
So in our discussion items, I'm gonna kick off our budget planning discussion as a board. So, but in terms of capital projects, if I understand your question correctly, Ken, are you talking about like a list of the next capital projects to be done for next year? Was that what you were asking about?
Yeah, the board briefing item we got was very responsive to the question in some sense of what's the plan to spend the cash that we have. So we have a cash balance that is what it is right now. And then there's a plan to spend that down over the next 2 to 3 years. And that plan we got in the spreadsheet, it's probably useful for us to discuss that and get a better understanding as a board of that particular plan. And I think that's part of the budgeting process. So I think it's useful information. I think the plans are in place to deal with the financial situation.
A part of the overall budget governance conversation.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I want to make sure I was tracking.
Right. So I think they basically have what would be a capital projects budget for the next 2 to 3 years, and then just being able to see that in more, just a touch more detail and in the process, and then being able for the board to understand, for all of us to understand, okay, this is the plan that's in place, and then I think that allows us, especially the longer term strategic things like the 2018 bond, what we do with the multi property, and all those other things, and what we need to do for continual ongoing maintenance and how that process goes. I think so it's more just an information of the board. We talked about that earlier in the retreat. And so I think, at least for me, that board briefing item was useful, and just finding a place where we can have enough time to talk about it in just a touch more detail. Yeah.
In 2 weeks. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, and we're gonna start the conversation tonight in terms of starting getting ideas like this, in terms of information that would help the board.
Okay.
That's exactly the kind of discussion I want to have, is information that will help the board kick off the budget process.
I would like to know approximately how much a new elementary costs. And I know that that's a wide range, but a 2-star, a 3-star, a 4-star elementary. So if you want to add that, you don't have to answer it tonight, but you can.
Actually, I think that was, I think there were some rough
There's
cost
also-
estimates
Yeah,
for
we-
different configurations of schools that were in that January
Yeah.
15th briefing.
Yeah, it depends, yeah,
I saw like a 70.
much is dependent on the site that you're developing, and then the square footage, the size of the building, the number of students capacity you're building for. So the estimate that was in the memo was determined off of the multi-site particulars that we know right now. We don't know all of them, but the ones that we do know now, and then basing it on a 100,000 to 200,000 square foot building, depending on the different grade levels that I listed there in the estimate.
100,000 square feet.
Square
would be
feet,
a-
sorry.
Would be a large elementary.
Yes, but we were, that was one of the
What,
wide range of things we were.
What's our largest elementary right now?
In square footage?
I guess square footage isn't necessarily the best way to
Woodmore
look at it because you
is
could build
the
up,
largest
right?
capacity.
Our largest capacity school, elementary, sorry, elementary. How many does,
I believe it was built for 800 students.
oh, wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's good to have on the agenda. And then I like knowing what the, anything that says unassigned, I think is really helpful to know kind of what it's earmarked for, because I think, you know, it's better to understand what you guys are thinking and not make assumptions.
All right. Any other discussions on the budget status report? So we'll move along to the next item on the agenda, which is project acceptance for January 2016. So 4 projects are included in this information item. Portables, it's all portables, Pace at Fernwood, Frank Love, Kokanee, and Maywood Hills. For summer, in summer of 2015, exactly. So this is the project acceptance report based on those portables that were placed this summer. Directors have any questions?
Expensive.
Citing is expensive.
Yes, yes, as we've talked about, particularly at these sites, we are getting down to the last available spaces to shoehorn in portables, and so they probably are the most difficult to site. So I think as we've talked about before, most of the cost is in the siting and the installation, not so much in the actual price of the building itself.
I had a question. Ryan, were these the portables that were ordered for the kindergarten?
Last year.
That was last year. Last year's.
These are all but one of the portables that we cited last summer. We bring them to you once they've been completely closed out and signed off on, and so this is actually last summer's work, not
Thanks.
this summer's work.
For this coming year, we've got orders for 8.
Yes.
And they're cited per the plan that the board approved at
That's
the
right.
last meeting.
That's right.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, 2 policy reviews. The first one is the first reading of Board Policy Number 1711, which is the Board of Directors Operating Protocols. I'll line up. So this is, just for the sake of everyone else here, this is a document that talks about how the board operates as a unit, and we discussed a couple revisions 2 weeks ago. And this is a red line version of the changes we had talked about 2 weeks ago. I want to see if anyone has any thoughts on the changes, any additional changes you might want to talk about.
So I called Amy this morning and discussed with her some things that I would like to discuss on this. So we've talked about it, just FYI. So she'll help me through it if there's there's a better way for me to say it. Should reframe from. I have like several suggestions that I want to run by you. I think, again, we're in a board retreat and we're having a facilitator, and then you walk away and you're able to kind of rethink some of these. So, and I think some of the things that we talked about yesterday, about how do we operate better as a board and start from, how do we operate well as a board, and we have a new board members and we have a different lens to look through and be cohesive and make this moving forward what's the best for our board. I think some of these things might have been, I just felt that was a good conversation yesterday, and so it's in the spirit of that and trying to be open and about. So I'll just go through my list. All right?
That's a good idea.
Getting consensus here. Number 4. I think that this has been a contention point, and so moving forward for it not to be a contention point, I think I know that at times different people may feel questioned, and so I just wanted to clarify what this looks like, where we say board members will strive to come to meetings prepared and well-versed, and will make reasonable effort will be made by individual board members to communicate questions to the appropriate staff. And I know that we've had this discussion while we've been in a board meeting, and I just wanted to say that if I'm asking questions, this is just a clarification, that if I'm asking questions, I expect that the board and the staff, as they always are, and all of us are prepared to answer questions to what's on the agenda and to have the discussion on the agenda. And that if it's outside the agenda, then, and obviously if that answer isn't available and someone needs to go look at it, then that's not a problem. But I also feel that we all have the expectation that whatever's on the agenda, we'll try our best to be prepared for and to be able to answer those questions. And where I see that asking those questions that aren't on the agenda, where we sometimes have these dialogues up here, that's, I think, where I feel like I really need to maybe take my time to make sure to ask those ahead of time. But when it's on the agenda, I feel like I need, and everybody is prepared, so that's not
Proposing a change?
Well, this is, so Ken is asking if you're proposing a change to the
not really on that
language.
one. I just felt that's been an area of contention with us, and I felt it was really important to clarify that. And I know I ask a lot of questions, and they're really in the spirit of just trying to get clarity, and I sometimes don't think of them way in advance. And I'm coming with the expectation that we all can have that dialogue. So I just thought it was important that we kind of flesh that out.
I would just want to add or just caution a little bit that even items that are on the agenda can be pretty meaty. So depending on the granularity of the question, I just want to temper the expectation that staff would immediately know. For example, we just looked at a budget status report. That doesn't necessarily mean that Lydia or Jolie would be prepared to speak to a particular voucher item that was on there. So I mean, there's global questions that I think staff should be expected to be able to answer on an agenda item, and then if it's a very specific question that might involve some more research, it would be best if we could get that in advance so that we could be prepared to answer that in the meeting. I understand that you likely don't want to ask that question in a public setting, even if you asked it and had it answered in private, just for the benefit of other board members or audience, and we're okay with that.
And I'm in agreement with you. So.
Okay.
And when we talk today as a board, I think that we should add language. So this is adding language to the board president or designee and superintendent shall confer prior to each board meeting. I think that we should add some language that refers that another board member.
So the idea that we have kind of standardized the practice of having another board member in the coordination meetings. So perhaps language
that discussion
along the line that the board president or designee and superintendent along with another board member if available, that inserting that language just to standardize what's our current practice.